All right. Well, everybody, this is episode 11 of the Working Tools Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a conversation on Freemasonry. I'm one of your co-hosts, Stephen Chung, a Master Mason, past Master of Prince Charles Lodge here in Kelowna, British Columbia. And with me today, we have Brother Connor Massey, and we have Brother David Colbeth, and we have Most Worshipful Jim Kendall. And I will pass the introduction torch over to David, and he can introduce himself and pass it over from there.
Hi, thanks, Stephen. Appreciate that. Hopefully my video is working okay. I guess I was kind of choppy this morning, but I'm David Colbeth. I'm a past master from King Solomon Lodge in Auburn, Washington State, and past district deputy and Scottish Rite. It was a long weekend over at reunions this weekend and some other things. So looking forward to today's conversation and looking forward to hear our Grand Master. So Connor, over to you.
Thank you, Dave. My name is Connor Massey. I am a Master Mason from Victoria, British Columbia. I am also a member of Royal Arch and the Order of the Eastern Star, as well as DMLA. Can't forget about DMLA. With that said, I'm super excited to introduce our very special guest today. I can imagine that you can already figure it out from the title of the video. But before I go into introducing our most worshipful brother, I'd like to remind everyone how you can interact with us during the conversation today. Naturally, you can use the Facebook chat. It's to the side or up or down from where you're currently watching us. I'm sure you can find it. And I will be, both Steve and I will be monitoring that and interacting with you. As well as, if you are not already a member of our Discord server, the link is in the description down below. That is a fantastic place to interact with us both during, before, and after the episodes of our podcast. Now, with that said, I believe I have a bio here to read, and with that, I shall introduce our most worshipful guest. Most worshipful James H. Kendall, better known as Jim, grew up in the town of Seaside, Oregon. He is the youngest of 3 boys, all of whom enlisted in the U.S. Navy. Jim enlisted in May of 1965, prior to his high school graduation, reported for duty in August of that year, and spent his 18th birthday in Recruit Training Command Naval Training Center in San Diego, California. He did not have a birthday cake, much to his dismay. In 1970, Jim applied for and was accepted into a commissioning program that brought him to the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where he earned a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and a commission as ensign in the U.S. Navy. Jim served in a variety of roles in the Navy, but his primary qualification was as a submarine nuclear weapons officer. Jim's Masonic career was intertwined with the last years of his naval service. Jim was initiated in Honolulu Lodge as a courtesy to his home lodge in Seaside. But time and the Navy waits for no man. Jim finally was stationed in Silverdale, Washington, and traveled to Astoria, Oregon, and Seaside, Oregon, to complete his degrees, a round trip of 400 miles. Jim finally completed his Master Mason degree and proficiency posting lecture in April of 1981. Jim has owned and operated small businesses since his retirement from the U.S. Navy in 1986. He currently operates a small internet company based in Bremerton, Washington. Jim celebrated his 50th wedding anniversary this past June. Jim married Alta in 1968, and they have 2 daughters and 4 grandchildren. Oh, yeah, and a 2010 Electa Glide Extra, limited edition Harley-Davidson motorcycle. Jim and Alta live in Port Orchard, Washington. Brethren, ladies and gentlemen, the Grand Master of Washington State.
Why, thank you. Yay. So I have to do a quick update of that bio. I no longer have that 2010 Harley. It went away, and now I have a 2019 Harley, David, which I picked up on Friday. So I'm very excited about that.
Very nice.
Yeah, it's been kind of an eclectic life and done a lot of stuff, kind of like jack of all trades and master of none, except I did master a few. So what do you want to talk about?
Well, let's talk about your journey to the chair. That's always an interesting one. Unless you want to talk about some of the things that you wanted to achieve and got to do, or just some experiences, or something that you think is vitally important that you want to share, like you were mentioning earlier.
All of the above. Well, I'm preparing to write my Grand Master's report, and I'm a little late getting that started. This has been, when all is said and done, a 6-year journey. I made myself available 2 years. I was elected junior Grand Warden the 2nd year. So that's 2 years, and you tack on 4 in the Grand Line, and it's been a journey. Traveling all over the jurisdiction, going to district meetings, visiting lodges, and interacting with the brothers. It's been a journey of growth. Now, seems a little strange from somebody who's 71 years old, but it's been a growing experience and a learning experience. And if you stop learning, you might as well dig that hole and jump in it, because you're dead. It's hard to describe what the journey has been like. Like any journey worthwhile, it had its bumps in the roads, but it has a lot of positives. We've accomplished a good bit in my 4 years as an elected line officer. We're wrapping up some projects this year that have been hanging out literally for years. And that gives me great satisfaction that we've been able to do that. As I mentioned earlier, before we started up, one of the things that I emphasize as I go through the jurisdiction and talk to lodges and districts and brothers is our fraternity is not dying. We heard too many times over the years, the woe is me, we're losing members, some of our lodges are closing, and a lot of hubris. And I'm here to tell you that this fraternity, as you should know, has been in its modern form for more than 300 years. We celebrated 300 years last year. Do you honestly think that an organization that has survived for 300 years is going to go away in a few years' time? And the answer to that, you should be, no, it's not. And in fact, I think that we're seeing a real turnaround in the numbers in many jurisdictions, including Washington. More enthusiasm, and in part that's because we've re-entered the public square. The Grand Lodge of Washington has a legislative task force that we have a resolution, a Grand Master's resolution, to make a regular committee. Now, our Washington Masonic Code says that if a committee exists for 3 years, then it needs to have a vote to make it a permanent committee. So that's one of the reasons why it's up. But what we've been able to do with that committee is to have more, I guess, exposure is one way to put it, to our state government, to the legislators, to their staff, but also to the local community.
And how is the committee achieving that?
Well, it's active. We've got, let me back up. We've got some active members. We've had a couple of really active members, one of whom is now a lobbyist. That's our junior Grand Warden, as a matter of fact. He worked for the legislature for more than 20 years, both the House of Representatives and the the Senate, rather, as a staff member. So we like to joke and say he knows where all the bodies are buried. But he is one. The other one who chairs the committee has been involved for probably 5 or 6 years. You just make an effort to go talk to your legislators, go talk to your parliamentarians, whatever flavor of government you have, and introduce yourself and talk about the fraternity and what we do for the community. Invite them to functions. If you're having a dinner, if you're celebrating young people, invite your elected officials, your mayors, your councilmen, your sheriffs, if they're elected, and even if they're not. Get involved and get in front of the community. We have failed to do that the way that we used to and should continue. Washington State is an example of how we lost sight of what we should have been doing. The first elected governor of the state of Washington was a past Grand Master of Free and Accepted Masons of Washington. Really? The first elected Secretary of State was a past Grand Master of Free and Accepted Masons of Washington.
Wow.
Wow. Well, how did that happen? That happened because the Grand Lodge is 31 years older than the state of Washington. And it was the Masons who wrote the first Constitution and the first laws that were submitted to Congress so that Washington could become a state. You can't get more involved than that.
Nope.
And that's not politics. We continue to hear sideliners sometimes say, well, that's getting political. You can't do that. Well, no, it's not. What we're doing is stepping up and becoming more active in the community and letting our elected officials know who we are and what we do. Drive through a town and you'll see a building, it'll have a square and compass on it, and it's kind of like, ho hum, oh, that's those old guys. I don't know what they do. You never hear from them. Well, that has to change, and it is changing. And we're seeing some very good results. Membership-wise, we complained about losing members. We got in a very bad habit if a man showed up and said, how do you become a Mason? Fill out this petition and you vote on him in a month. And you don't know who this guy is. And guess what? They don't stick around because they don't know what they're getting into.
No.
By taking our time in the 6 Steps program we're using here in Washington, it can take 6 months to a year before that guy even gets a petition so that he knows what we're about and we know who he is.
And did you get a lot of grief in instituting that program like we did?
It's been a rocky road, but those lodges that have taken it to heart are doing extremely well. And that's setting the example for the guys who are having difficulty with it.
My question that I have for you is that 6-step program mandatory for all lodges, or is it up to the individual lodge to decide whether or not to use it?
That's up to the lodges. We don't dictate that. We encourage as strongly as we can and point out the successes, I might add. And but that's a lodge function. They have to step forward. You can't mandate go and get more members because that's what we were doing in the past and it didn't work.
Yeah, we in my lodge adopted that program. I was the Worshipful Master in 2011. Grand Lodge of British Columbia put out the 6-step program in 2012 in our jurisdiction, and I made that my mission to institute that program in our lodge. And the funny part was that there's this really thick stack of papers to read, and I'm not much of a reader, so I got through the 6-step program, but I didn't go into the mentorship program. And man, I tell you, when the brother who opened that up, that opened a whole can of worms, and we have a phenomenal program now. But I'll tell you, that 6-step program you're talking about, we used to have an 80% attrition rate. Guys coming in, buddy knew him from work, but he didn't really know him. We never had put them through the 6-step program because we didn't have it, and then they'd be gone because they weren't getting what they came for. And so now with the 6-step program, we're really identifying what they're coming for and trying to give that to them with things like instituting a more light night, which is casual conversation, much like this. Pick a topic, wherever it goes. Educated brothers give the answers. If not, we look up stuff and come back to the next one. But we now have a retention rate of 92.3%.
Incredible. That's great.
Right.
Yeah.
So good for you.
Yeah. Another it's not apocryphal. Another input was we were at a chili cook-off at one of the lodges in Seattle early on, and as part of the conversation went on, they were proud to announce that they had 4 new EAs and they had a couple of petitions ready to read. And this is a lodge, like many of them, that if you added a new member every 2 years, you thought you were doing good. And so it was really good to hear that. And as we're walking into the lodge room, my Grand Marshal, who's a member in Franklin Lodge number 5 with me, tapped me on the shoulder. And I said, yeah, what? He says, well, in Franklin Lodge, we just did 3 EAs and we did one more dual member. Really? Why is that remarkable? That's remarkable because Franklin Lodge number 5 exists in a ghost town. They are in Port Gamble, Washington. Port Gamble used to be the lumber capital of North America. Pope and Talbot had a huge lumber mill there, and that it was a company town. All the little homes and whatnot belonged to the company. Well, they closed shop about 30 years ago, and of course, everybody moved away because there was no work. But the lodge is still there, and it has survived primarily on members from other lodges coming in to take part in this historic lodge. Well, now they have EAs coming in. They have new petitioners, and they've gone through the 6-step program. You said one thing that's really key, and that is to learn about the individual, what it is that they are seeking, and then provide that. Once they're a Master Mason, you don't sit them on the sidelines and ignore them. They need to have a mentor, and you need to use their interests to the advantage of the lodge. So that's another key. Good on you.
Yeah, no problem. With the interesting thing I found through that whole bunch of people that I've put through the 6-step program since is that roughly about 30% are coming for the, we say we take good men and make them better, and they're coming for that type of education. And we had never really done a really good job of explaining that. And I think that phrase is really wrong. We don't take good men and make them better. We provide the tools to assist good men in making themselves better.
Exactly.
And so now what we're doing is trying to enlighten them as to what the tools are and how to identify, the benefits in Freemasonry, as the sayings go, are very much illustrated by symbols and veiled in allegories, and it's up to the individuals to decode it all and make sense of it. And so if they don't know the basis of that, they never clue into it. And so it's kind of interesting to see guys that have come through the program and have now been in a few years, and they're really, now you're watching them involved in the mentorship program and helping guys understand these things for themselves, right? One of the big things our mentorship program does is the coaching for the prove-ups. And what they do in that coaching process is if somebody doesn't understand what it is they're saying, they'll stop the whole coaching thing and they'll look it up, they'll investigate it, they'll make sure that everybody understands that piece so that they have a deeper understanding of what it is they're repeating and where it comes from.
Yeah, perfect. I like the fact that you point out that we don't take good men and make them better. We can't do that. What we do, as you say, is we give them the tools so that they can make themselves better. And those tools, we have so many that you couldn't address them all. It's just amazing. One of the things that the Grand Lodge of Washington has is the continuing education program, if you will. It's a program that takes the new member through the 3 degrees and gives a history and gets into depth on a lot of what that means. I encourage guys, even if they've been a Master Mason like me for 30 years, pick that thing up, go through it. You'd be surprised what, number one, you forgot, and number two, you never knew, oh, gee, I'm a Master Mason, I know everything. Oh, no, you don't.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because in one of the lectures, I say that the education comes from the east like brilliant rays of light from the rising sun. And I sit there and I reflect back as to when I was a worshipful master and thinking, man, if that was my responsibility, I really wasn't prepared, because I know nothing compared to, I still know nothing now compared to the whole scheme of it, but compared to what I thought I knew back then, oh man, the stuff I've learned in just participating in the mentorship programs, more light nights and things like that is amazing, right?
There's an old saying, and it's if you want to learn a topic, teach it.
Right. And I've been for 20
Yeah.
years, and I'm starting to teach it, and now I'm learning it too, right?
Yeah, you got to do your homework, huh? So, David, tell us about your lodge, because I know you've had success with the 6 steps.
We have, Grandmaster, and a little bit of a claim to fame. If you may or not remember, when I was deputy, you were, I don't know if were you chairing membership then, or were you a member of membership at that time?
I was membership 1 year, yeah.
And it was when the 6 steps was first coming out, and it was really a big push to have trainings on the 6 steps. And so you offered, as you've done generously today, to come and talk with our district about membership, about the 6 Steps program. And so I made a call out to the guys. I think we had 15 or 20. It was 24 hours or less than 24 hours notice. And again, you dropped what you were doing or whatever and came over and talked with us. And we had 15 or 20 guys from our district, and then we had about 15 or 20 from District 14 as well come up and support us. We had a great crowd and learned about 6 Steps. And it has been very effective in our lodge. It still does baffle me a little bit when some guys say, "Oh yeah, we gave this guy a petition, then we put him through the 6 Steps." Well, no,
Yeah,
obviously,
that's not how it works,
I
partner.
haven't read it yet, but it really works really well. And we actually help. We may not do all 6 steps, but even someone that's come through DMLA or that we've known them for a while, we still ask them to go through the 6 steps fundamentals. Again, they've already done the first step. They've asked. They've already done the second step. They've talked to us. They've really effectively done 4th and 5th steps. They've gone through social nights with events and being part of the youth groups. And so really it's just step 3 and step 6 that they need to do is, so we ask them to read the Approaching the Portals was one of the things we do. And then we ask them to do the 12 questions, not 12 steps, but 12 questions about Masonry and truly understanding. We think sometimes the DMLA, they've been around us so long that they know what Masonry is about, and they know about our lodge and what we do. And it gives them opportunity to actually answer these questions, yes or no. Do they understand there's a time commitment, there's a little bit of financial commitment and things like that. And so it wasn't a DMLA. We had a candidate that he got through, he answered yes to 11 questions. And then there was one that he couldn't answer yes to. And it was a revelation for him. He had been coming to social nights. We developed a social night so that we can have that opportunity to invite guys over and be part of things and learn about the 6 steps. And he had been coming to social night, and I said, "Has anybody asked you if you wanted to ask the question?" And he goes, "Oh no, not really."
So do you guys down there also make them do the memory test?
I have a couple of times. We don't enforce that as much as we probably should, and so, but we don't as much as we probably should. I'm sure there are some lodges that do that, but
yeah, it's mandatory for me. I won't receive a petition unless they can do the memory test. Now I don't know what you guys use, but in the Canadian version of the Address to the Brethren, the ideal of a Freemason, at the end of it, we take that page and we give that to them and ask them to commit 3 paragraphs to memory and then repeat them and from memory. And we won't receive their petition until they can do that, because there's no point if they can't do the memory work, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny because every single person has asked me for the full copy of that so they can get into it afterwards, right? And so that's kind of cool too.
Yeah, for sure.
We in my lodge, we have them memorize the master's charge at the end of the meeting. Brethren, we are now about to separate,
Mm-hmm.
and so we ask them to do that. Or there's another one, I think, the apron lecture we ask them to do. But in my lodge, and I think the other lodges in the district, we absolutely ask them to do that. Because as you say, if they can't memorize a simple paragraph or 2, then they're going to have real problems learning to work.
So what other kind of things do you guys have in works in your Grand Lodge there for to address the declining membership thing that we were talking about?
Just before we go into that topic, I just want to put my 2 cents in on the 6-step program. I know we've talked about it on a podcast in the previous episode, but unlike the 3 of you, ancient/American workers, I'm a member of an emulation or an English lodge, and we don't do the 6 steps to initiation at all. We have people come to the festive boards occasionally, but when I was initiated, I never went through it, and several brothers that we've initiated never went through it. So they just go through the filling in the petition, then the investigation, and so
on.
But granted, our ritual requirements, like what we expect of our candidates in order to prove up in the degrees, is about 1/5 of what Steve does. I'm not sure what the prove ups in an American lodges are, but they're substantially simpler than an ancient working lodge.
Yeah, and I'm going to suggest that And it's a suggestion only that you ask your brothers to kind of rethink that approach. It's not so much making them jump through a bunch of hoops. And really, if you think about it, it's not a 6-step program, it's a 5-step program. The 6th step is when you hand the petition to what I call the inquirer. But however, as long as you are taking the time to really learn who that man is, and he has an opportunity to learn what Masonry and your lodge is all about, you can call it happy hour for all I care. But the key is that you take your time with these guys and you don't just shove them through the door because they show up and you're happy to have a new member, because that inevitably will backfire on you. So anyway, I made the point about the 6th step because I think it's important to understand it can be 3 steps. It can be 12 steps. It doesn't matter. Whatever the lodge wants to do, the goal is so that you have a firm understanding, as much as you can get it, of who this individual is. And are they a good fit for your lodge? They may be a better fit for a different lodge, and don't be shy about pointing them in the other direction.
What are your thoughts on the opposite end of, like, the more extreme end of the spectrum, where you're looking in, like, the Philippines, where it takes almost a year, if not longer, or was it Cuba you were telling me about, Steve, in order to even be given a petition?
Oh, Cuba. Well, that's a whole, yeah. So in Cuba, at the lodges I went and visit, the petitioners or the wannabe Masons, they sit downstairs and guard the bicycles and the mopeds for the lodge every Monday night until the Grand Lodge of Cuba vets their petition. They vet them to make sure that they're good people, and then they give the lodge permission to initiate them. And sometimes that process, like last year when I went to Cuba, or this January when I went there, the 4 guys outside, 9 months, 13 months, 15 months, and one guy had only been there 6 months, right? It's amazing. And there's no rhyme or reason for how long it takes them to do it either, right? I guess just whenever it gets done, they're on Cuban time.
Yeah. The Japan is an extensive process, I'm given to believe, and the Philippines also very, very involved process that they go through. And you don't get to go to the next step like fellowcraft until you learn every piece of work on the entered apprentice degree. Everything, the lectures, the charge, the obligation, and you have to be able to repeat that, I'm told, almost to perfection. So when our Philippine brothers come here in the Navy, and they're so happy that, gosh, this is easy compared to what I'd have to do. Yeah, that varies by jurisdiction and by country. I think in North America, we're certainly not that involved, but and that will vary to some extent. I think each jurisdiction is unique, and each jurisdiction has a unique history, even if you're right next door to each other. And what has evolved over the years is probably pretty good, and it's embedded now. So live with it.
Something you had said in our Blue Room, I was hoping to make sure that we get out there, was you had identified that our membership isn't necessarily declining. It's in a cyclical cycle. And that's an obvious reason for the numbers. And I think it's important that some guys understand what that really means and why that is having the effect that it is.
It's actually a matter of history, because as you look at the history of the fraternity, especially in the United States, World War II and Korea saw a huge influx of members into Masonry. Huge. The Grand Lodge of Washington, as I recall, was something like 60,000 members by the end of World War II and through the Korean War. And the rationale given for that is guys were in the Army or the Air Force or whatever for 3, 4, 5 years. They built a real brotherhood and camaraderie with the guy next to them. Then when they left, they wanted to have that again. And Masonry provided that. And that was actually a poison pill. because now you didn't have to work hard to have members. They were knocking on your door faster than you can make them Masons. I mean, literally.
Right.
And as that changed between Korean War and the Vietnam War, we started to see a decline, and we started to see the age ramp up as the members got older, but didn't have as many new guys coming in. And that continued. Vietnam, I don't think actually showed a huge improvement in membership. I'm sure it had some effect, but that's a horse of a completely different color. Now, Grand Lodge of Washington was losing, had an attrition rate of a percentage that you could pretty much count on every year. And this past year, if we had continued that trend, we would expect to lose net 1,000 members. We didn't. We didn't lose 800 members. We didn't lose 500 members. Our net loss was 300. A great improvement, and we're seeing this in the membership, and that is, in my view, because of such things as the legislative task force, such as the lodges being more involved in their communities. Some of the stories that I heard as I traveled this year were just phenomenal, of how lodges are bringing in new brothers, many of them, if not all of them, using a form of the six-step program. One of the lodges up north was involved with community programs paired with Chamber of Commerce, Rotary, school district, fire district to do these events. So they were part of the community doing good works and showing the colors, if you will. They're growing like popcorn. It's just amazing to see, because, doggone it, we are part of the community. In many ways, we built our communities way back when. And it's about time we went back out there to show who we are. That's showing results.
Right. And what other ways are you encouraging the lodges to get involved in their community? The simple things that they can do.
We do the Bikes for Books program, which is fine. We need to do more than that. And there's no one magic pill that's going to cure all this. Each community is different. In the larger communities, you'll have more than one lodge. Is there a public charity that you can get involved in, perhaps? Pick one. Make your own. The most important thing is find something that the community needs or would appreciate, and then go do it. The key is go do it.
Right.
Because you hear members sit around and say, well, we don't know, don't know what to do, don't know how to do it. Hey, brothers, there's so many opportunities out there. Go learn about them and then just go do them.
Yeah. Well, they're talking about putting advertisements in the newspaper and things like that. But, the newspaper's a dying breed as well. And so one of the things our lodge is doing is we're going to be giving away free pancake breakfast when the downtown association has their sidewalk sale, where they shut the streets down and it's just everybody walking around looking for all the good deals. We thought we'd give away free pancake breakfast, something like simple.
Absolutely. I know one of the lodges does a monthly breakfast open to the public. Come have some scrambled eggs and bacon and etc. Oh boy, you were talking, remind me of something now. I can't remember what it was, so it must not have been important.
The downtown association?
Well, yeah. I guess one of the things that I want to say is it's fine to do these one-off, once-a-year things. Try to find something you can do more often. Like as I mentioned, that one lodge monthly has a breakfast. Another lodge will do a different thing. So it's a matter of what are the community needs, or what would they like to do. One of the lodges has a movie night. So I think it's either every 2 weeks or every month. They show a movie, it's open to the public, come on in. We got popcorn, we got hot dogs, we got hamburgers, enjoy. And if you want to ask questions, fine, but we're not pushing it off on you.
Cool. What's David got to chime in here? He keeps wanting to unmute himself.
Well, like last week we had Most Worshipful Jim Mendoza on, and he's helping to promote the Lansdowne portrait. And the idea behind that promotion in Washington, at least, I don't know, maybe it's across the country. I don't know, unfortunately, that much about the program. I should know, but the intent is that you get them into the city halls, get them into the schools mostly. And so that opens the door, the opportunity to get into those public places. And just as Grandmaster indicated, when you're presenting this Lansdowne portrait to the city hall or to the mayor or the city council, that what should be the next question? What can we do for you? Right? And what does the city need? What can we do? Now, maybe we're not going to go out and fill potholes, but if there's an opportunity for, we used to do the child identity program, and so maybe there's some education, some safety education that could happen at a fair or downtown association. You could have a booth there that would talk about children's safety education, or veterans outreach. We have a veterans outreach program, and that's dear to Grandmaster's heart. And hopefully he'll talk about that a little bit later too, about the veterans programs that we're doing here. But there's opportunity. It doesn't always have to be, it could be pancakes. It doesn't have to be physical. It could be support related in some fashion. Through Washington, we have the Washington Masonic Charities. So it could be a charity outreach to support for the elderly or the youth, or all kinds of opportunities. It could be more virtual than tangible even.
So you bring up a couple of points, and thanks for doing that. Washington Masonic Charities and the Masonic Service Bureau in Seattle both get involved in, for example, building a ramp for an elderly member who can't handle stairs anymore. So they get the materials together, go build the ramp, and that can be reimbursed from Washington Masonic Charities, that sort of thing. I want to publicize that. Hey, look, we're helping our community, we're helping our elderly, the widows and the shut-ins to have a better life. The Military and Veterans Recognition Committee, frankly, I can't remember what the heck we call it, was a task force, and then we 2 or 3 years ago we voted to make that a permanent committee, and that is specifically to help our veterans get the services that they're entitled to. As I was going around the jurisdiction promoting this, I'd point out that if you do a head count of members of our lodges who either were in the uniformed services or had a family member in the uniformed services, often you'd have 90% of people present stand up. And yet you find that veterans frequently don't want to talk about their service and don't want to self-identify as a veteran. I don't know why that is. I don't know if that's because we've been made to feel like, the Vietnam veteran didn't get a good reception when he came back. But as a consequence, a veteran in need will not even think about what services are available to veterans. So in a way, that committee will serve as a clearinghouse for a veteran who has a particular need. We don't provide all the services. We don't try to, but what we do is try to be a clearinghouse for government programs, for programs from veterans organizations, whatever it is that need is, and up to and including providing some physical support, maybe a wheelchair, if they need a walker, if they need a ramp built, any of that. So we are more active in the public and with veterans organizations. We've got one brother who's retired Air Force who's very active in the veterans community, Steve Pennington, and he was tapped to help I think it was Everett Community College, to build a veteran center, and he raised $1 million for that. And so those sort of programs are what we do, and they're not limited to just Masons, but there's a real need in that community. Now, another thing that we're doing is we're working with homeless kids. There's a federal program that tasks school districts to track students who are homeless, to see that what their success rate is and what might be done to help them. So we are starting to get more involved. I think we're up to 7 or 8 lodges. This is fairly new for us, who have contacted the school districts and are acting as the point of contact for the fraternity to reach out and help as needed. One of the things that we find that every school district is doing, they don't advertise it, but they're doing, is something called the Backpack Brigade. And in one form or another, they take donations, they put them in a room, and the students go in one by one. They're handed a backpack, and they go in and fill it. It can be food for the ladies. It can be feminine products. It can be soaps, whatever it is that they need. They fill it, close up the backpack, and they're on their way. And they go in once a week. That is a phenomenal program because we have far more kids who are in trouble than you know about. They do things, they call them couch surfers. They'll spend a week at a friend's or classmate's house sleeping on their couch until it's time to move on, and they find another couch, or maybe they're living inside in their car.
So who picks up all these supplies for the backpack program?
Well, those are donations that are some of our lodges are actively promoting the donations. Bring in items, money if you want. But it's not just the Masons doing that, but the Masons have taken a lead in several of our communities in doing that. It's a great idea. If you're not familiar one in your community, I challenge you to go to your school district and ask them, you have a program like this. Is there a need? And you'll find the answer is yes, there is a need.
Right.
We can work on helping fill that. That's what we should be doing.
I love
great ideas.
It ties in directly, Grandmaster, with one of your parts of your message. I really, really love this piece. It says, "Let me return to one glaring fact that we all know, and yet we don't want to acknowledge, and that it is with the best programs in the world, with the best intentions in the world, we will not achieve the positive results promised unless each of us pulls up his britches, rolls up his sleeves, spits on his hands, and grabs a hold of and goes to work." And that's 100%, just like you're talking about. If you don't actually go to work, we can talk about it and we can have these ideas, but if you don't do something physically and get out there and do it, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Walk the talk is one of our past grands had as its theme. Walk the talk. Do it. Well, guys, I think I need to start wrapping up here. Is there anything else we need to talk about?
Well, if there's any final message that you'd like to see gets out there, remember these podcasts get viewed over and over and over again over time. So this is your opportunity to cram out a message to the general listener.
Grandmaster, if I could make a pitch, I love your closing speech at district meetings and things about the late at night talk, unless you had something else planned.
Well, I could do that. So at some of the district meetings and other meetings, I asked those present to close their eyes. So close your eyes and think about a time when at the end of the day, you're relaxing. Maybe you've had an adult beverage. Maybe you've got a cold tea. You're sitting out on the back porch, or maybe you're at the beach and you hear the whisper of the wind through the leaves. You hear the birds. And you're just finally relaxing. So you take a deep breath and let it out. And think about that experience. And you're thinking about how your day went. And that leads you into thinking about how your life has gone. You've had bumps and bruises, but you think about who you are as a person. And deep down inside, in your heart of hearts, in your soul, do you believe that you are a good person? Do you believe that you are a good person? I believe that you're a good person. I believe that every Mason who has gone through the trip really is seeking a way to be a good person. So ends the story. So ends the lesson.
Wonderful. Well, there's so much more we could talk about, but as you say, it's time for you to wrap it up. So I wanted to thank you, Most Worshipful Brother, for joining us on the podcast today.
My pleasure, and thank you for inviting me.
And I'll copy that. And again, thank you. And I'd like to remind our listeners that if you enjoy the show, please review us on YouTube, and it really helps us with our rankings. Eventually, we'll get funds enough to be out there on all the podcast apps. But for now, please review us and let YouTube know what you think. Thank you, Most Worshipful Grandmaster, for coming on and sharing your time with us today. It's much appreciated.
My pleasure. I bid you adieu.
All right.
Alrighty. So for those who are still listening, thank you all for tuning in tonight. As Steve said, make sure you review us on YouTube. And yeah, any last words from Dave?
Thank you. It was a pleasure to have Grandmaster on this week, and look forward to talking with you later and our guests next week and the future.
Absolutely. And just a reminder, I can't remember if we mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast, but our opinions are our own and by no means reflect the opinions or views of any of the Grand Lodges represented or any of the individual regular lodges.
I knew I missed something.
Now, with that said, I hope everyone has a fantastic day, and we will see you next week.
Next week.